Do you have opinions, either of you, about what vowels are...
Wait a second, I want to ask you some muscle memory.
Yes.
What is muscle memory, though?
I don't want to hear about it.
Is it okay if I answer this?
Yeah, I'm interested.
The muscle memory, I mean, to me, it just means that the muscles become accustomed to an action that they've been disciplined to make.
Right, but it's still your head. Your head is
For
giving
sure,
the signal.
for sure,
It's
for
all still coming from the head. The head has learned this so well that it's giving the signal that the muscles know exactly what to do.
I always...
What muscles?
Something's happening here when you do those things.
I never felt anything.
Joan and I have been through this before.
I just get back to that good old breathe, support, and project. And I mean, leave the vocal cords alone. Don't mention them. I'm talking to you. I'm not thinking about my vocal cords, except that I've got a stinking cold and I don't know that I'll last the day out. But you have to have that freedom around here. It's here that the support comes from. It's from the body. The body is like a plinth, and the sound is you throw the sound away once you've learned how to.
Okay, but your muscle memory is also coming from your head that tells your muscles of your diaphragm and your pelvis and all of this. You're giving the signals.
Yeah, well, that's all the muscle memory I want to know about. I don't want to know about around the vocal cords, the pharynx, the larynx, the glottis, anything. Thank you.
The extraordinary thing about learning to sing, as opposed to any other musical discipline, is that, as I think it was Rameau who said this, the transformations of the larynx are not at our disposal. By which
Who said that?
There are muscles and they are doing things, but we can't work them directly. We can't. The brain is sending signals that, in effect,
It's a reflex, like speaking.
Yes, exactly.
But
Singing
Because
is
we can't tell the vocal cords assume the position for C sharp. We have to think of a C sharp and sing it, and then they do it.
The head
if you do, set up a trill or something like that, and if you do put your hands slightly here, you will definitely feel vibrations.
Oh yes,
happening.
you will.
That's for sure.
So
I think that's the vocal cords vibrating, kids.
It's the voice box jiggling. That's
Yeah,
what
yeah.
Garcia is.
The air is passing over.
Yeah, both of you have attached importance to the name of Garcia. Say some more about that, would you please?
Well, Garcia, the daddy Garcia was the great singer, Manuel Garcia the First, who sang, he was the original Almaviva in Barbara Seville. He had the great Otello of Rossini written for him. A lot of people have said that maybe he wasn't really a tenor, that maybe he was a baritone, but we know him as a tenor. And then his two very famous daughters were Maria Malibran Garcia and Pauline Viardo Garcia, who were arguably two of the greatest singers of the last century and certainly of all time. But his son then, Manuel Garcia II, became the great voice teacher. And he obviously took the principles from his father and ran with them, and the basis sort of all vocal technique falls on his shoulders.
I think it's fair to say that he was the first to codify traditional Italian vocal technique and try to describe some of it in scientific terms.
And write it all down.
With pictures.
Right. And then because he was so curious to see, pardon the expression, the vocal cords, he invented the laryngoscope, the famous mirror that gets stuck down the back of your throat, which is now practically done away with because of technology. Now they just put that gun in there and look at the television. But the laryngoscope was his invention, so he could see.
Before we started, Dame Joan, you were talking of a book of reminiscences of someone who studied with Garcia.
That's right. It was Herman Klein, whose parents took Garcia into their home when he came to London, and Herman Klein apparently sat in at many of Garcia's lessons and actually worked with him as well. He published a little leaflet back in 1923 with, I think it was called the Bel Canto with special reference to the singing of Mozart or something. It's about 50 pages, and I have an old copy from that period. But this treatise was reprinted in a book in 1990 called Herman Klein and the Gramophone, and those 50 pages are in the front of that book. I would advise any student to read and inwardly digest as much of it as they possibly can, because there's a great deal of common sense in the book, and it does explain a lot of things, you know, as to what is required to have a beautiful voice and get up and make a professional career. There was another book, which Jackie knows also, called Vocal Wisdom, which is things that are taken down from the teaching of Lamperti. And that is available also in America. I think it's Taplinger is the publisher. It's about, I don't know, $8 or $9, I think. But these books are terribly interesting. I find them interesting, and I find myself reading them and nodding and thinking, yes, that's about it. That's someone, I did that sort of instinctively, or else I was taught to do it one thing or the other. You have to be able to understand what they're getting at, but it basically is very simple, and there's a wealth of instruction in those two little books.
And didn't you also say, Will, that Garcia's book actually is easier to get now?
Yes, the big Garcia book. Well, there are several versions. He himself made an abridgment, a very short abridgment of it into English that's called Hints on Singing, and that is reprinted, I think, by Padelson's itself. I mean, I think the store has also made the reprint. And then there's the big book from which that was reduced, and that has now been translated into English and is published by, I want to say Garland, but I'm not sure that's right.
Is it true, I'm going to ask you because Will is the fountain of knowledge of all this, that Garcia's fame came from teaching Jenny Lind how to sing again, his real reputation?
That was certainly one of the things that
the famous thing that Jenny Lind had been a great prima donna of Scandinavia, very, very famous and highly paid, and then she lost her voice, and she went to Garcia, and there's the famous phrase that they still argue about whether he said, Madame, vous n'avez pas de voix, or Madame, vous n'avez plus de voix. But then the famous, you know, the treatment that we all read about was that he made her not speak for a period of time, like 6 weeks or something like that. She could not even speak. She had to totally rest her voice. And then he started teaching her painstakingly from the bottom up again, and then she became the great Jenny Lind that we all knew. But I thought that she's the one who really established his fame, saying that a voice teacher also needs to have some real big talent come through the door.
Doesn't hurt.
I remember a story that my great accompanist, Gwendolyn Kaldowski, had. Gwendolyn was my teacher and my accompanist for at least 10 years when I started singing recitals. Her aunt, Florianne Brimson, isn't that a great name, sang with Melba when Melba toured, you know, with her own company in this country, singing Faust and Romeo and Juliet and all her great roles. And Florianne was always singing Siebel or Stefano or something like that. Anyway, They all studied with Marchesi. Now, Madame Marchesi and her husband were also disciples of Garcia and studied with him. And the great story is that she kept saying to her husband, "We just need one great voice to come through the door." And then one day she ran up to his studio and said, "She's here." And it was Melba. And that made her studio.
Well, they also taught Sybil Sanderson too.
Oh, lots of
Sybil
others.
Sanderson,
lots of
Emma
others.
Calvé,
That's right.
Francis Alda, a good list. Good list. Emma Eames.
Yeah, I was just saying.
Yeah, they.